On New Year's Eve, my mother gave presents to every grandchild in the room except mine. She did not forget. She looked directly at my daughter, Emma, smiled as if she were enjoying a private joke, and handed the last glittering gift bag to my brother's son. My name is Julia Mercer. I was 40 years old that night, old enough to recognize cruelty even when it wore pearls and called itself family tradition. The living room was crowded with wrapping paper, champagne glasses, and the warm yellow light from my mother's expensive Christmas tree. Every branch was decorated perfectly. Every stocking had been measured so they hung at the same height. Every gift had a gold tag written in my mother's careful handwriting. Except there were no gifts for Emma or Noah. Emma was 11. She stared at the empty place beneath the tree where her name should have been. She tried to smile, because she had already learned that showing pain only gave certain people more power. Noah was 8. He pushed both hands deep into the sleeves of his sweater and looked down at the carpet. My nephew Tyler tore open a new gaming console and laughed. "Wes, your kids weren't good enough this year." The room became quiet for half a second. That half second mattered. It was long enough for every adult to understand what had happened. It was long enough for someone to correct him. It was long enough for my mother to protect her grandchildren. No one did. My brother Brent chuckled into his champagne. His wife Melissa kept scrolling through her phone. My father raised the television volume, as if a football game could drown out a child's humiliation. I looked at my mother. She sat in her favorite chair with her hands folded over her red dress. Her silver hair was perfect. Her expression was calm. I waited. Finally, she said, "Children need to learn consequences. Maybe next year they'll be more grateful." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Noah leaned toward me and whispered, "Mom, did we do something wrong?" Something inside me became cold and clear. For years, I had tolerated my mother's quiet punishments. Smaller birthday cakes for my children. Invitations that somehow never reached us. Family photographs where Emma and Noah were pushed to the edge. Holiday dinners where Tyler received praise for breathing, while my children were criticized for speaking too loudly, eating too slowly, or failing to thank someone with enough enthusiasm. I had made excuses for all of it. I told myself Mom was getting older. I told myself Brent influenced her. I told myself Dad hated conflict. I told myself family peace mattered more than my anger. But peace that depends on humiliating children is not peace. It is surrender. I stood slowly. My mother's smile tightened. "Don't make a scene, Julia." "I won't." I helped Emma into her coat. Then I helped Noah. I picked up the untouched casserole I had brought and tucked it under my arm. Brent leaned back on the couch. "Seriously, you're leaving over toys?" "No," I said. "We're leaving because all of you enjoyed watching children get hurt." Melissa finally looked up from her phone. "That's dramatic." I looked at her. "Your son just told mine they weren't good enough. And you said nothing." She shrugged. "They're kids." "Exactly." My father turned away from the television. "Sit down, Julia. It's New Year's Eve." I met his eyes. "Never invite us again." The room went completely still. My mother blinked. She was not shocked by what she had done. She was shocked that I had finally answered. "You'll regret speaking to me that way," she said. "No," I replied. "I regret waiting this long." Then I walked out with my children. Cold air hit us the moment we stepped onto the porch. Behind us, music started playing again. Someone laughed too loudly. My family was already trying to erase the moment. In the car, Emma turned her face toward the window and cried without making a sound. Noah said, "I didn't want presents anyway." That hurt more than if he had screamed. I started the engine and looked at both of them through the rearview mirror. "You did nothing wrong," I said. "Do you understand me?" "Nothing." Emma wiped her cheek. "Grandma doesn't like us." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell her adults were complicated. I wanted to soften the truth. But my children had already been forced to live inside that truth. "Grandma made a cruel choice," I said. "And from now on, we're going to choose people who make us feel safe." Noah asked, "Are we still doing New Year's?" I smiled, even though my hands were shaking. "We're doing pancakes at midnight." That earned the smallest smile from him. We drove home through streets lined with holiday lights. I listened to my children slowly begin talking again. Emma suggested chocolate chips. Noah demanded whipped cream. By the time we pulled into our driveway, they were arguing over whether pancakes counted as dinner or breakfast. I let them argue. It sounded like healing. What I did not tell them was that my attorney had spent the previous 3 months preparing documents my family knew nothing about. My mother believed she was punishing my children. She had forgotten who paid the mortgage on her house. She had forgotten who had settled the tax lien 5 years earlier. She had forgotten the agreement she and my father signed when I rescued the family trust. Most of all, she had forgotten that kindness can keep records. At home, I made pancakes while Emma and Noah built a blanket fort in the living room. At midnight, we wore paper crowns made from grocery bags and watched fireworks through the window. At 12:17 a.m., after both children had fallen asleep inside the fort, I sat alone at the kitchen table. My phone showed 6 messages from my mother. The first said I had embarrassed her. The second said I was teaching my children to be selfish. The third said Brent thought I needed therapy. The fourth reminded me that family was forever. The fifth said I should apologize before things went too far. The sixth was different. It read, "You would have nothing without us." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I opened the email from my attorney, Daniel Cho. The subject line said File Kafu Armayun. I read every page one more time. The notice was legal. The trust resolution was complete. The audit request was attached. The courier had already been scheduled. I typed 2 words. Proceed tomorrow. At 6:00 a.m. on January 1, while my family slept off champagne and cruelty, their New Year's gift arrived at the front door. The documents arrived inside a white courier envelope bearing my mother's full legal name, Margaret Elaine Mercer. I knew the exact moment it reached the house because the courier service sent me a delivery photo. The envelope sat against the blue front door beneath the brass knocker my grandfather had installed 50 years earlier. At 6:08 a.m., my phone rang. Brent. I let it go to voicemail. At 6:11, Dad called. At 6:14, Brent sent a message. What the hell did you do? I poured pancake batter into a skillet while Emma and Noah watched cartoons under blankets. The children thought we were having a second celebration breakfast. I did not tell them what was happening across town. At 6:20, my mother left a voicemail sharp enough to cut glass. Julia, you will call me immediately. This notice says the house is being transferred into sale preparation. That cannot be right. It was completely right. The house had belonged to my grandfather Henry Mercer. When he died, he placed it in several accounts in the Mercer Family Trust. His instructions were simple. The home should support the family, and the education accounts should help every grandchild and great-grandchild build a future. For years, my father served as trustee. That changed when he ignored property taxes for 3 straight years. 5 years before that New Year's morning, the county had placed a lion on the house. My parents never told me. I discovered it by accident when a notice was mailed to my old address. I worked in financial compliance, so I understood exactly how serious the lion was. I paid the taxes, penalties, and legal costs. Then I refinanced part of the trust property to repair the roof and replace the failing furnace. In exchange, the trust attorney recommended appointing me controlling trustee. My parents agreed because the alternative was losing the house. They also signed an occupancy agreement. The agreement allowed them to live there, without rent for the rest of their lives, provided they maintained the property and followed several conditions. One condition prohibited any beneficiary child from being deliberately excluded, mistreated, or financially exploited in the home. My mother laughed when she signed it. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "Charge admission to Christmas." I remember smiling. "No," I said. "It is just standard protection." It was not standard. Daniel had added that condition because he had witnessed my mother's behavior during a family meeting. She had spent 20 minutes praising Tyler, then called Emma, sensitive, for asking when it was her turn to speak. Daniel noticed what I kept pretending not to see. My mother assumed kindness meant weakness. She assumed family agreements were symbolic. She assumed no one preserved evidence. At 7:03 a.m., someone hammered on my front door. Emma jumped on the couch. Noah ran toward the hallway. "Stay inside," I told them. I looked through the peephole. Brent stood on the porch wearing yesterday's clothes. My mother stood behind him in her long wool coat, still wearing her pearls. My father waited near the driveway with his arms folded. I opened the door but kept the security chain fastened. "You can't sell my house," Mom said. Her face was swollen with exhaustion and panic. For once she was not performing confidence very well. "It isn't your house," I said. "It is trust property." Brent stepped closer. "You're doing this because the kids didn't get video games." "No." "Then stop acting crazy and cancel it. Leave my property." Dad moved toward the porch. "Julia, enough. Your brother and his family need stability." I almost laughed. Brent was 43. He had lost 2 apartments because he refused to pay rent on time. He had borrowed money from our parents, me, 3 cousins, and at least 1 former employer. Yet every time consequences arrived, my parents called it a stability problem. "My children needed dignity," I said. Mom pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is because of presence. This is because of a pattern." "What pattern?" "The one your own security cameras recorded for 2 years." Brent stopped moving. The house had cameras in the living room, hallway, kitchen, and front porch. I paid for them after Dad fell on the basement stairs. Because the system was billed through the trust. The recordings were automatically stored in a secure cloud account I controlled. My mother had never considered that her comments might still exist after the room became quiet. I continued. "The recordings show Emma being told she could not sit with the other grandchildren. They show Noah being blamed for breaking Tyler's tablet before he even arrived. They show you giving cash to every grandchild except mine on 3 birthdays. They show Brent calling my children freeloaders inside a house I financially support." Melissa's car pulled into the driveway. She got out wearing sunglasses and slippers. "This is insane," she said. "You've been spying on us." "No. The trust security system recorded activity inside trust property. Everyone signed the camera disclosure." My mother looked at Brent. He did not look back. Then Daniel's dark sedan turned into my driveway. He parked at the curb and walked toward us carrying a leather folder. Daniel was calm in the way only very prepared people can be calm. "Good morning," he said. "Mrs. Mercer." "Mercer." "Brent." Mom's voice became softer. She always changed her tone around professionals. "There has been a misunderstanding." Daniel looked at me, then back at her. "The documents are clear." She pressed a hand to her chest. "My daughter is emotional." I felt the old reflex rise inside me. The urge to defend myself. The urge to prove that I was reasonable. I let it pass. Daniel removed a second folder. "There is another issue," he said. I watched Brent's face. He already knew. "And there's one more document in the envelope," I said. "The audit request for every dollar taken from Grandpa's education fund." Brent's expression changed before my mother understood what I had said. That reaction told me enough. Daniel opened the folder on the hood of his car. "The preliminary review shows repeated withdrawals from the grandchildren's education account over 18 months, he said. "The total currently identified is $186,400. For the first time that morning, no one interrupted him. My father stared at Daniel. "That can't be right. It is supported by bank statements and transfer records." Mom gripped her pearls. "Those were family expenses." "No," I said. "Tyler's private baseball coach was not a family expense. Brent's truck payment was not a family expense. Your cruise was not a family expense." Melissa removed her sunglasses. "What cruise?" Mom looked away. That was the first crack. Dad turned toward Brent. "You said Julia approved the withdrawals." Brent opened his mouth, but no useful explanation came out. My stomach tightened. I had suspected financial abuse for months. I did not know how much Dad understood. His question gave me the answer. Brent had lied to him. Maybe Mom had too. Daniel continued. "Several transfers used an electronic authorization assigned to Mr. Mercer. We will need to determine whether the authorization was given voluntarily, obtained through deception, or used without permission." Dad looked suddenly older. "I never approved $186,000. Brent lifted both hands. "It wasn't all me." Mom snapped. "Be quiet." Daniel closed the folder. "That is why there will be an audit." Brent looked at me with open hatred. "You planned this?" "Yes." "How long?" 3 months. His confidence flickered. 3 months earlier, I had received a quarterly trust statement showing a withdrawal labeled educational enrichment. The amount was $12,000. At first, I assumed it covered tuition or tutoring for one of the grandchildren. Then I saw that the money had gone to a company called BLM Performance Group. The initials matched Brent Lee Mercer. I searched the company registration database and found a new business registered to a mailbox store. The contact number belonged to my brother. When I asked Mom about it, she said the transfer covered special learning support for Tyler. I requested receipts. She stopped answering my calls for 4 days. That silence told me to look deeper. Daniel and I reviewed 18 months of trust activity. We found payments to a baseball academy, a luxury travel agency, Brent's truck lender, and a contractor who had renovated Melissa's kitchen. We also found 6 checks made out to cash. Someone had tried to hide the withdrawals by moving money through small accounts and labeling them as educational expenses. The plan was sloppy, but it had survived because nobody expected me to challenge my parents. For years, Mom told relatives that money had made me distant. She never told them I paid her utility bills. She never mentioned I covered Dad's medication after his insurance changed. She did not explain that when the roof leaked, I used my emergency savings to repair it. Every time unexplained money disappeared from the trust, I replaced part of it because I was afraid the grandchildren would suffer. I told myself I was protecting the family. In reality, I was protecting the people hurting it. The final 3 months before New Year's Eve had been a test. Daniel advised me not to reveal the audit immediately. First, we needed to determine whether the mistreatment clause was being violated and whether the house itself was being used to pressure beneficiaries. The security recordings answered both questions. On Emma's birthday, my mother told her she could not have cake until Tyler chose his piece. At Thanksgiving, Brent said my children should be grateful they were allowed inside because their mother thinks she owns the place. 2 weeks before Christmas, Mom told Melissa she planned to exclude Emma and Noah from New Year's gifts to teach Julia where she belongs. She said it in the kitchen, directly beneath the camera. The cruelty was not impulsive, it was planned, so was my response. On the porch, Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. You would investigate your own family. I investigated the trust. You're enjoying this? No. I'm finished fearing it. She studied my face, searching for the daughter who apologized whenever her mother became uncomfortable. That daughter was gone. Daniel handed her another official notice. You and Mr. Mercer have 30 days to relocate, he said. The trust owns a smaller rental property on Willow Street. It has 2 bedrooms, 1 level, and no mortgage. The trust will cover basic moving expenses. Mom looked at the paper as if it were an insult. You expect me to live in that little house? It is safe and fully maintained, I said. I raised you in the main house. Grandpa owned the main house. Her mouth tightened. Daniel explained that the larger property would be prepared for sale. Proceeds would restore the education accounts, repay trust expenses, and create a protected medical reserve for my father. Any remaining shortage would be deducted from Brent's future inheritance. Brent exploded. You can't take my inheritance. It is not yours yet, Daniel said. Melissa turned on him. How much did you take? I said it wasn't all me. How much? He looked toward Mom. That was the second crack. Mom stepped between them. We are not discussing private matters in the driveway. Melissa laughed once without humor. My kitchen is private. Your cruise is private. His truck is private. But my son's college money was public. Tyler had not come with her. I was grateful for that. He was spoiled and cruel sometimes, but he was still a child shaped by adults who rewarded cruelty. Dad sat down on the porch step. I had never seen my father look defeated. Even after heart surgery, he made jokes. Even when the store closed, he said retirement would be an adventure. That morning, he looked at his own hands and whispered, I trusted you. I did not know whether he was speaking to Mom or Brent, maybe both. Brent swore and walked toward his car. Daniel said, you should not destroy, alter, or remove financial records. A preservation notice is already in effect. Brent stopped. That frightened him more than the sale notice. He turned back. Are you threatening criminal charges? I'm explaining the legal situation, Daniel said. Mom looked at me. You'd humiliate your own mother. Behind me, through the front window, I could see Emma and Noah drawing at the kitchen table. Emma was showing Noah how to fold paper into a crown. They were warm. They were safe. You humiliated my children for sport, I said. I'm protecting them for life. Mom waited for guilt to accomplish what love no longer could. It failed. She left without another word. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, Daniel called me into his office. He placed a copy of my grandfather's original trust amendment on the table. Then he showed me a signature I had never seen before. My name was written at the bottom. The signature was forged. The forged document was dated 4 years earlier. According to it, I had approved changing the trust rules so education money could be used for general family advancement. The language was vague enough to cover almost anything. A truck, a cruise, a kitchen, a failed business. Daniel slid the page toward me. Did you sign this? No. Are you certain? I looked at the looping J in Julia and the sharp line beneath Mercer. Whoever copied my signature had studied it carefully, but they had missed one detail. I never used my middle initial on legal documents. The forged signature read Julia A. Mercer. My legal signature was Julia Mercer. I'm certain. Daniel nodded. Then this is no longer only a trust dispute. I felt cold. Who submitted it? It was scanned from your father's home office and uploaded through the trustee portal using his credentials. Dade. We don't know. That was the mystery beneath everything else. Brent was irresponsible, entitled, and desperate for money. My mother was controlling and willing to punish children to hurt me. But forging a legal document required planning. It also required access to samples of my signature. I drove to the Willow Street house, where Dad had moved ahead of Mom. He opened the door wearing a gray sweater and carrying a box of medication. The smaller house was plain but comfortable. Morning light filled the living room. His old recliner sat beside the window. Your mother says you're trying to send Brent to prison, he said. I'm trying to learn who forged my signature. He froze. That was enough to make my heart sink. You knew? I asked. He sat in the recliner without answering. Dad. I knew there was a document. What does that mean? He rubbed both hands over his face. Brent told me you had agreed to help him start a business. He said you were too busy to come sign in person. So he brought you a paper with my forged signature. He said it was a copy. And you uploaded it. Dad stared at the floor. Your mother did. The room seemed to shrink. Did she know it was forged? He did not answer quickly enough. I walked to the window and looked out at the narrow yard. A plastic snowman leaned beside the fence. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. I thought about all the years Dad had turned up the television when Mom became cruel. I had called him peaceful. I had called him tired. I had even called him a victim, but silence can protect cruelty just as effectively as a lie. She knew, I said. Dad's eyes filled with tears. She said it was temporary. Brent promised he would repay everything after his company took off. His company did not exist. I know that now. No, Dad. You knew enough then. He flinched. I hated hurting him. That was the trap my family had always used. They hurt me, then made my reaction feel like the real injury. He reached toward me. Julia, please. Your mother is frightened. My children were frightened too. She made a terrible mistake. A mistake happens once. This was a plan. Dad lowered his hand. Then he told me something I did not expect. The New Year's gifts had not only been about punishing my children. Mom had planned to pressure me into signing permanent control of the trust back to Dad. She believed that if she embarrassed Emma and Noah badly enough, I would confront her privately. Then she would offer an apology in exchange for restoring family balance. She had already prepared the transfer documents. She said you would do anything to make the children feel accepted. Dad whispered. For several seconds, I could not speak. My mother had used my children as leverage. The empty space under the tree was not simply cruelty. It was a negotiation tactic. A new anger moved through me. It was quieter than rage and far more useful. Where are the documents? Dad pointed toward a cardboard file box beside the dining table. Inside, I found unsigned trust transfer papers, printed emails between Mom and Brent, copies of my signature, and handwritten notes. One note said Julia will fold after the kids cry. Another said remind her family loyalty goes both ways. The last line was underlined twice. Once control returns, repay B from sale proceeds. B meant Brent. Sale proceeds meant my grandfather's property. They planned to regain control. Sell one of the rental homes, erase the missing money, and pretend none of it had happened. Dad watched me read. Your mother wrote those. He said. You kept them. I didn't know what to do. Yes, you did. You chose not to do it. I took the box. Mom arrived before I could leave. She walked through the front door without knocking, carrying 2 shopping bags. When she saw the box in my arms, all color left her face. Arthur, she said to Dad, what have you done? For once, he did not look away. I told her. Mom set down the bags very slowly. Then she looked at me and changed tactics. Her shoulders dropped. Her mouth trembled, her voice became soft. Julia, I was going to fix everything. You forged my signature. I protected your brother. You stole from children. Brent was under pressure. So was I. I didn't commit fraud. Her eyes hardened. The weakness disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. You always thought you were better than us. No. I thought if I worked hard enough, paid enough, and stayed quiet enough, you would treat my children like they belonged. They are too sensitive. They are children. And you are ungrateful. There it was. The word she used whenever I refused to be controlled. Ungrateful. I lifted the file box. These records are going to Daniel. Mom stepped in front of the door. You walk out with that box, and you destroy this family. I met her eyes. No. I'm taking away the tools you used to destroy it. She slapped me. The sound was sharp in the small room. Dad stood up so quickly his medication box fell to the floor. For a moment, none of us moved. Mom looked at her own hand, shocked by what she had done. I touched my cheek. Then I noticed the small camera above the front window. The Willow Street house also belonged to the trust. It also had security recording. Mom followed my gaze. Her face changed. I did not smile. I did not threaten her. I simply opened the door and walked out with the evidence. 3 weeks later, the court hearing began. My mother arrived at court wearing navy blue and carrying a leather handbag. She looked calm enough to attend church. Brent sat beside her in a suit that did not fit. Melissa sat several rows behind him. She had filed for legal separation after learning he had opened credit accounts in her name. Dad sat on the other side of the courtroom with Daniel and me. That surprised everyone, including me. The night before the hearing, Dad called and said he wanted to tell the truth. I spent my whole life avoiding conflict, he said. All I did was teach your mother that silence meant permission. He gave Daniel a sworn statement describing the forged document, the plan to pressure me, and the false claims Brent used to obtain access to trust money. It did not erase his choices. But it was the first honest thing he had done in a long time. There was no shouting and no jury. There were documents, dates, bank records, security footage, and a judge who asked direct questions. Facts gave my mother nowhere to hide. Daniel showed the original occupancy agreement. He showed the camera disclosure forms. He showed the withdrawals from the education accounts and the transfers to Brent's shell company. Then he showed the recording from the kitchen 2 weeks before New Year's Eve. My mother's voice filled the courtroom. If I leave Julia's children out, she'll come begging for peace. Then we make her sign. Brent's recorded voice answered. She always folds when the kids get upset. I looked straight ahead. Hearing the words again hurt, but not in the same way. In the courtroom, their cruelty no longer controlled the story. It had become evidence. Mom's attorney tried to argue that the statements were family frustration, not proof of financial intent. Then Daniel introduced the handwritten notes from the box. Julia will fold after the kids cry. Once control returns, repay B from sale proceeds. The judge asked my mother whether the handwriting was hers. She said she could not remember. A handwriting specialist had already confirmed it. The judge asked whether she knew my signature had been copied. Mom said she believed I had approved the document verbally. Dad testified that she knew I had not. Brent tried to blame both of them. He claimed Mom controlled the money and Dad gave him access. Then Melissa's attorney produced messages in which Brent bragged that he had found a permanent family ATM. By lunch, the family story my mother had protected for years was gone. She was not a generous grandmother managing a difficult family. Brent was not an unlucky son who needed support. I was not the cold daughter who cared more about money than love. The truth was simpler. They used money to reward obedience and cruelty to punish resistance. The judge upheld my authority as controlling trustee. The forged amendment was declared invalid. The main house could be sold. The education accounts had to be restored. Brent's inheritance interest was frozen pending the full accounting. The judge also referred the forgery and unauthorized transfers to the district attorney's financial crimes unit. Mom's attorney requested mercy because of her age. The judge looked at her for a long moment. Age may explain vulnerability, he said. It does not excuse planning. Outside the courtroom, reporters were not waiting. There were no flashing cameras. Our family scandal was not important to the world. But it was important to us. Mom approached me near the elevator. For the first time in my life, she looked uncertain about what expression to wear. "You got what you wanted?" she said. "No. You took my home. You still have a home. You turned your father against me." He told the truth. "You destroyed Brent's future. Brent spent money that belonged to children." Her eyes narrowed. "And what do you call what you did?" I thought about it. Stopping. She looked confused. "I stopped paying for silence. I stopped confusing fear with respect. I stopped teaching my children that family can hurt them without consequences." The elevator doors opened. Mom stepped inside, then turned around. "One day Emma will treat you exactly the way you treated me." I looked at her calmly. "I hope she does. I hope if I ever humiliate her children, steal from them, or use love as leverage, she has the courage to stop me." The doors closed between us. The main house sold in April. It brought more money than expected because the neighborhood had changed and the property was larger than most buyers realized. After taxes and repairs, the trust had enough to restore every education account in full. Emma and Noah's accounts were placed under independent protection so no family member, including me, could use them for anything except education and approved future expenses. Tyler's account was protected too. Some relatives questioned why I protected Tyler's account after what Brent had done. The answer was simple. Tyler was a child, and I refused to become my mother. Brent was ordered to repay a large portion of the missing funds. He sold his truck, closed the fake company, and moved into a small apartment. The district attorney eventually offered him a plea agreement that included probation, restitution, and a permanent fraud conviction. Mom received a separate agreement because she cooperated after the hearing. She avoided jail, but she lost all authority over the trust and had to complete financial ethics counseling and community service. She called that humiliation. I called it consequence. Dad stayed in the Willow Street house. He began therapy and joined a support group for families affected by financial abuse. Our relationship did not repair overnight. Some damage should not be rushed. He apologized to Emma and Noah without making excuses. "I saw things I should have stopped," he told them. "I was wrong." Emma asked him, "Why didn't you help us?" He swallowed hard. "Because I was afraid of making Grandma angry." Noah frowned. "But you're a grown-up." Dad nodded. "Yes. That's why it was my responsibility." It was not a perfect apology. It was an honest one. The children decided they wanted to see him again. We started with lunch once a month in public places. Over time, those lunches became visits at our house. Trust returned slowly, one kept promise at a time. My mother sent several letters. Most blamed me, Brent, stress or misunderstanding. I did not answer. In October, one letter finally admitted the truth. She had wanted control more than closeness, and she had used my children because they were the easiest way to hurt me. She did not ask for forgiveness. She said she understood if I never trusted her again. I placed the letter in a drawer. An apology can be real without becoming a key back into your life. The following New Year's Eve, Emma and Noah helped me decorate our living room. Our tree was smaller than my mother's, slightly crooked, and covered with paper ornaments the children had made at school. There were presents underneath, but not many. One book for Emma, a science kit for Noah, warm socks for all three of us. At 11:30, Dad arrived carrying pancake mix and a box of paper crowns. He stopped in the doorway. "Am I too early?" Noah grabbed the box. "You're late. We already started the whipped cream." Dad laughed. For dinner, we ate breakfast food. At midnight, we stood on the porch and watched fireworks flash above the roofs. Emma leaned against me. Mom, yes. Last year, when Grandma didn't give us anything. I thought it meant we weren't part of the family. I wrapped my arm around her. I know. But now I think maybe family is not who gives you presents. What do you think it is? She looked through the window at Noah and Dad wearing paper crowns while they argued over the last pancake. People who don't make you earn being loved. My throat tightened. That sounds right. At 6:00 the next morning, I woke before everyone else. The house was quiet. Paper crowns rested on the coffee table. A few dishes waited in the sink. Snow had begun to fall outside. For years, I believed revenge meant making the people who hurt me feel the same pain. I was wrong. Real revenge was ending the pattern without becoming part of it. It was protecting every child, even the one raised to mock mine. It was allowing truth to cost the guilty something, while refusing to let bitterness cost my children their future. It was waking up in a peaceful home and realizing nobody inside it was afraid. My mother once used an empty space beneath a tree to tell my children they did not belong. A year later, that empty space was gone. Not because I filled it with gifts. Because I finally removed the people who believed love was something they had the right to withhold. And that was the only New Year's gift we ever needed.